Welcome into the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM, the king of sports books. We're back for another NFL draft betting preview. The NFL draft is this month. We are recording on April 1st. The draft takes place in Detroit, Michigan, starting April 25th. Brendan Glasheen, your host, with Action Network NFL draft betting contributor, draft expert, also contributes at Bet Labs. Travis Reed is here. Action Network director of research and media, Evan Abrams, and our newest Action Network NFL contributor, Jacob Wayne. Let's dive right in. A lot happened last week with some pro days for some pretty notable quarterbacks that we think are going at the top of the draft. They could very well be in the middle of the first round. Who knows? Any bets that we want to make now? I'll start with Jacob. What do you like right now that you see on the board?
Yeah, quarterback wise, I'm still buying Drake May anytime I can find plus 150 or better on his odds. I still think he should be the favorite to go number 2. I know there's a lot of love for Jayden Daniels in the market, but a lot of smart people in the space have Drake May still mocked higher. And to me, Dana Jeremiah still has him number 2 in all of his mocks. All of the film and everything I've watched all lead me to believe that Drake May is a better quarterback prospect, but excited to see how that plays out. Despite
Brian Kelly maybe saying that little bit did you hear the Brian Kelly bit from the pro day?
Yeah, I believe that was on a Washington local broadcast where they asked him what would Jayden Daniels bring to Washington, and then they cut out that specific clip where it looks like he's like, oh, he's going to Washington. Just in general, be careful with those kinds of things because they can massage them to look however they want. And yeah, I wouldn't read too much into that.
Okay. I am happy. I've been very on this. I think I've made this clear. I am happy to be that sucker who takes the bait on those things. And then you guys can tell me I'm crazy or tell me I'm onto something. But I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page there because there was a clip that did go viral and it's exactly what you're saying. You got to be careful and know what the source is, where it's coming from, et cetera, et cetera. Brian Kelly, LSU head coach, was chatting about his quarterback at LSU's pro day with a Washington TV station, local interview. Travis Reed, anything you got that you want to get off your chest right away?
Yeah, so some kind of recent news with Rashee Rice. Don't know any of the facts. I'm not going to pretend that I do, but it obviously does not look great for that situation. I think that increases the likelihood that the Chiefs go wide receiver in round 1. And I haven't really seen the market really adjust to that. An example, I took Xavier Worthy at 9-1 to go to the Chiefs today. So I think some of those wide receiver to Chiefs markets have not updated yet. Again, like I said, we know nothing at this point. I don't think anybody does. We'll leave that to the Schefters of the world to figure that stuff out. But it's not a good thing for Chiefs wide receivers. So I think that makes it more likely they go that direction in the draft.
So even money for the Chiefs, and we should get this out there too, that several new markets available, specifically position of first player drafted, now available at a league-wide level. There were some teams last week when we were here, pretty much every team, with the exception of those teams at the top of the draft, are available. So I would ask Chiefs wide receiver, even money for their first pick. Is that stay away? Bad price?
It's okay. Yeah, I'm not betting that one. I'll take more of the long shots with the specific receivers in that range at this point. Because they could still go corner to try to replace Snead. They could still go offensive tackle to try to protect Mahomes. So there's still a few different options there. So I'll still try to actually hit the parlay of getting the correct receiver right for now. So we'll see if we get news that, the Rashee news is worse than it is. That plus 100 looks more and more attractive.
Okay, very good. Evan Abrams, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I had 3 things kind of going around my head, and this is all just based off news. So Travis hit one of them. I'm trying to feel an opportunity on Kansas City based off the Rice news, just because I think you just have to react to news no matter what it is, because that's something that is just the way the NFL draft markets kind of work. So wide receiver was definitely the angle. The other one I was kind of looking at, I even saw a mock do this, is like, would it be possible they would look for a weapon in terms of like a tight end or something like that? They're 100-1 to take a tight end. They could trade up for Bowers as I was looking at it. Like either way, if something happens with Rice looking for another offensive person target weapon is something that I was looking into. I kind of agree with Jacob in the sense that Drake May and Jayden Daniels are truly a coin flip right now. You have mocks coming out where 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. They're kind of both in those slots. So I truly see it as a coin flip right now. You had one mock. I'm looking at Draft Network, who does a decent job. Has Jayden Daniels going later in the draft at this point than they have him as 6 to the Giants. So I do see some people starting to move back a little bit on him and May getting a little bit of momentum. But I said it last week, I still like Daniels. Jacob likes Drake. So probably a wash on that one. And the last one was offensive lineman. I took a shot on, and I'm going to screw up his name, so it's cool with me, but Fashanu to be the first O-lineman taken, basically over Alt. I got it like 11 or 12 to 1. I think it's down to 10 to 1. Just purely taking a shot. I see some mocks coming out this morning that have Fashanu still in his right spot, but late last week, some were talking about that 9 slot, maybe Alt moving back, but Alt's pretty locked into that 7, so it is a bit of a long shot.
And that would be, is your angle also factoring in maybe a trade, possibly that someone's higher on Fashanu over Alt? Possibly?
Yeah, something like that. I also, the Titans need what they need. Everyone likes Alt there. So there is a possibility they like another offensive lineman. And I felt like Fashanu kind of had the momentum that the other, let's say 2 or 3 behind Alt didn't have, which would be Fuaga and Latham. Took the shot there. I also think over 9.5 offensive linemen in round 1 is worth talking about and intriguing. It really comes down to Morgan and Kingsley to see if they get into the end of the first round, I think. So that was the other bet I was looking at.
Okay. That's a great way to dive into a bunch of stuff. Let's just go from the top. BetMGM still has a pretty good price on Drake May, plus 150 to go number 2. That's a good price when you shop around and you take a look at some other books. But BetMGM's got a plus number at plus 150. Jayden Daniels minus 150 to go 2. And then just for comparison at 3, Drake May is the favorite at even money minus 110. Daniels at plus 160. Jacob, I want to pick your brain on this. Now that we have the first player drafted markets available at a league-wide level, what's something that you try to keep in mind just for that market in general, now that most of the audience now has that full landscape available to them?
Yeah, so you're saying the first player, like first wide receiver, first offensive lineman, those markets?
No, I mean like position of first player drafted for on a team basis.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, so obviously free agency adjusted these markets quite a bit. We talked about that a few weeks ago. So some good discussion there if you want to go back and listen to that. But at this point in time, like we kind of know what teams' needs are. So make sure you're on top of that and understanding so a good example. Looking at the Bengals right now, you can get plus 425 on one book for them to take a defensive line or edge in the first round, or with their first pick rather. Offensive lineman is minus 200, and definitely see offensive line being their biggest need, but defensive line is still a very big need as well. And you can kind of piece some things together there. Trent Brown was signed to play right tackle for them. Pretty serviceable player for them, who I think can hold down the fort on that side. And on defensive line, they lost DJ Reader, who was a huge piece of their defense. BJ Hill is in the last year of his deal. The Bengals' run defense was an absolute disaster last season, so could definitely see them trying to address that in the first round. And they did bring in Sheldon Rankins at D tackle, but he was not good for Houston last year. So looking at guys like Byron Murphy, Johnny Newton in that range, potentially even going edge, could be an option as well. So looking at basically what team needs are, what they did in free agency, what are they kind of indicating, and also just understanding what the best player available might be at that point in time, because teams might not necessarily draft for their biggest need with their first pick.
Okay. Travis, I know you just kind of hit on that using the Chiefs as an example. Anything that you'd suggest to the audience when it comes to team first player drafted scenarios?
Yeah. I would look at the depth charts. Needs are kind of vary, depend on, maybe it's a weakness, or maybe there's just not that position on the roster right now. There's a big array of, okay, how big is this need? An example is the Saints offensive line. If you literally go to their depth chart, they don't have an offensive tackle right now at left tackle. So that's more of a need than another team that may just have a weakness at tackle. So I'd say looking at those depth charts, figuring out, okay, is this just kind of a weakness, or is this more of they literally don't have that guy on the roster right now? So I think looking at that is kind of another good thing to look at before you start placing bets on this market.
Evan, anything to add?
GM trends. I mean, they've said some really, really smart stuff. Those are all things you have to look at. But like, if certain GMs like to go certain directions, it's what I like to look at as well, as like probably the third peg on the spectrum, because you do want to look at depth charts, you do want to look at weaknesses, and you do want to look at free agency. I think those are all a little bit more important than like past history. But probably a little helpful.
Okay.
It's important too to
yeah.
bring up, like, for a team like the Packers, like we've seen, they have very clear thresholds of players that they won't draft if they don't fit into like arm length or size or speed, whatever. So understanding that type of stuff, like Evan was talking about with GM tendencies, super crucial too.
So Evan hit this a few minutes ago. Fascinated by receiver, offensive line, the quarterback thing. We'll get to JJ McCarthy because the market has shifted pretty seismically on him. But when we talk receiver, so Adam Schefter threw this out there the other day. Some NFL personnel believe Malik Nabers is the top receiver, which we hit on one of our first episodes with the possibility of Marvin Harrison Jr. going number 5. Now that's pretty close, both on the even spectrum now, almost. Nabers is plus 200 to go 5. Marvin Harrison Jr. at plus 250. Another team, it seems like a small move, but like Josh Reynolds going to Denver. Does that mean that they're maybe eyeing a quarterback, which I'm going in a bunch of different directions here, but where are we at, Jacob? Your temperature on the receivers at the top of the draft after pro days. Washington had their pro day. Penix was a stud, but more noise coming out here on receiver. And I'll throw this in there too, and it relates to offensive line. Jim Harbaugh had that eye-popping quote on how important O-line play is, and that to me sounds like at 5, that could be a trade down situation, and he's also been gloating about his college quarterback, JJ McCarthy. It all kind of connects here. But it sounds like Jim Harbaugh is more convinced on trying to get the line right and the running game right for Justin Herbert, and he can figure it out.
Yeah, I did see those comments from Harbaugh. Harbaugh talks a lot. As a Michigan fan, I'll tell you, over the past few years, he says a lot of things that don't actually come to fruition. So I wouldn't try to read too much into the coach speak there. But I do think if they stick at 5 and Marvin Harrison's off the board, going to be difficult for them to not take Malik Nabers, given their clear need at receiver there. Especially after Mike Williams signed with the Jets. So he's not coming back now. So they lost Keenan Allen, lost Mike Williams. Like, they definitely need a wideout. I still see Marvin Harrison as the first receiver off the board pretty comfortably. And to me, like, what I've been saying is I don't think he would skip all the testing, skip the pro day, skip everything. Like, if he didn't have a very clear draft guarantee from a team picking near the top. And I think that team's the Cardinals. It's difficult for me to believe, like, if his agent thought that there was a chance that he would be the first receiver off the board, then he wouldn't be doing all these drills. So that's kind of where my head's at. And I mean, he's still minus 500 to be the first non-quarterback selected. I wouldn't be betting that number, obviously, but I don't really see much value on Nabers at this point.
Okay. Travis, anything you want to chime in on with the Harbaugh? You were nodding your head when I brought up the Harbaugh stuff, and that relates to O-line and receiver.
Yeah, I think Harbaugh's wet dream would be win a game throwing like 4 passes, that even with Justin Herbert. So whether or not the GM and the front office is going to allow him to do that, that's another question. I don't know how much say he's going to have in all of these draft picks. I think if he had his way, it would be O-line. But I kind of agree with Jacob. They just don't have receivers right now. It's one of those we just mentioned. Look at the depth chart. It's pretty gross. It's Quentin Johnston and a bunch of players that are somehow worse than Quentin Johnston. So it's definitely a need. But we did mention how deep it is. So I could see them if they wanted to move back and say, okay, we can still get a Dunze or one of these other guys and get more draft capital. Cause they need both. If they could somehow swing and get an offensive tackle and a receiver in the first round, I could see that as a possibility. And them being at 5, I still think is maybe the most likely trade out point in that top 10.
Okay. Evan, you've got thoughts on the O-line. You mentioned over 9.5 in the first round, but I'm trying to connect the dots on what the Chargers are thinking. And like Jacob's done this to me twice now in 10 minutes about how I should stop. I should ignore some of the stuff that these guys are saying. which I don't
Yeah.
say that with a slight. I meant that as like, thank you, Jacob.
Yeah, Harbaugh's the worst. I mean, he has all the well, no, but you have to understand something, and I'm sure you do. He has all the momentum in the world and all the understanding to lie to everyone. Like, other than Arizona, he's probably in the biggest driver's seat position to be fielding offers, and so he's ultimate smokescreen right now, at least in my opinion. And he said it, so it's either trade out. Do you get the wide receiver? I saw a mock that had Atlanta moving up from 8 into that 5 slot for the Chargers to maybe draft a Neighbors. So, if you're trying to jump in front of, let's say, the Jets, and Harrison and Neighbors are both gone, then maybe it's a Dunze to the Chargers. If they move back, they get extra picks. They still get a wide receiver, a little bit of two birds.
Let's do JJ McCarthy, because this is starting to aggravate me a little bit. Is this guy is he Will Levis? Is he the 2023 Will Levis situation? JJ McCarthy to be a top 5 pick is priced at -270. And the Vikings are now plus money to take him. And I haven't seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, please chime in if I'm missing something here. I have not seen yet the Vikings are visiting with JJ McCarthy or Drake May. I haven't seen that yet. And I would add the Patriots are now plus 340 to draft JJ McCarthy. And that relates because the Patriots have 3 and to be a top 5 pick at -270. But I haven't seen a visit. I haven't seen a scheduled visit occurring in the near future for JJ McCarthy and one of these teams that are drafting high. Travis, it seems like you have something to say.
It feels, this is the hard part about betting on the draft. You have to kind of put your own personal opinions aside, because I'm like, why is this guy even projected to go in the top 5? So that's kind of, but then it's like, that doesn't matter. I'm not making the pick. I'm just trying to bet on what the other teams are trying to do. So I do. It's weird that Minnesota has not made that trade up, but we're all still thinking that that's what they're going to do. So that's kind of, I like the plus money on saying JJ McCarthy does fall. I still think he's probably going to be in the first round. If you look at those position totals, it's over 4.5 and it's juiced to the over. So not only are we saying McCarthy's in the first round, we're also saying one of Bo Nix or Penix is also getting in the first round. And that seems weird to me also. I mean, I guess teams do get desperate for quarterbacks, but we've seen a couple years in a row now where these quarterbacks just get kind of posted in the first round because we think these teams are going to love them, and then they're still there on day 2 of the draft. So I kind of like taking the under there with 4.5 quarterbacks and kind of betting against this quarterback love right now.
The other news from the Washington Pro Day, Michael Penix told ESPN he has pre-draft visits scheduled with the Giants, Falcons, those are both teams in the top 10, the Raiders and the Broncos, which we hit on last week, and the Steelers. Steelers are right now, they are positioned to draft at 20th overall. But again, who's to say? They don't necessarily have to take them in the first round. Those visits could be set up to take in the second round, right? Or the third round, if that is how it plays out. Jacob, you have anything to add on JJ McCarthy, some of the line shifts in JJ McCarthy?
Yeah, so I did pull it up. It looks like the Vikings head coach, Kevin O'Connell, and GM, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, did have a private workout with McCarthy right after his pro day. So that did happen. But as far as the odds currently, yeah, I mean, it's it's out of control, man. And like at a certain point, you have to kind of buy the, try to sell high on the JJ McCarthy market. We've talked about some of the ways to do that. I still think a flyer on some of these teams, like maybe the Raiders at 35-1 isn't the worst idea with how crazy these odds are. But man, I mean, you have reporters coming out and saying that Washington's looking at him for number 2. And like, there's got to be some kind of a smoke screen, and like there has to be a sell high point at some point. And I think we're pretty much at that point. So definitely looking at some different ways to do that.
Evan, you got thoughts on this? JJ McCarthy, -270 to be a top 5 pick.
Yeah. So the difference for me, at least from McCarthy to like Will Levis, is Will Levis felt like it was coming from 1 or 2 sources at minimum. It happened in a very quick nature in terms of his rise to the top, while McCarthy feels like it's actually gaining some momentum. And I think Travis said this, and I'm going to echo that. It's not about what I believe, right? It's about what I am reading, what I'm seeing. and me trying to put the puzzle pieces together. Levis felt fake. It was. McCarthy feels real. And I'm not thrilled about it. And I don't think I love it from like whoever's team's perspective that's going to do it. But at least the top 8 range feels like it's something that's going to happen. Someone's going to move up for him. I think 2 and 3 is just, crazy. And I think 3 is actually possible. But I'm with Jacob in the sense that I'm going to take some flyers on him at least to move back a tiny bit. Like, let's talk about Denver or talk about that Raiders, which is 45-1 at one book. Denver is about 9-1. So those are probably more the shots that I'm going to take, assuming so many teams need a quarterback. He's probably going to go in that mix. I'm just gambling on the fact that Minnesota goes somewhere else because also they haven't even made the trade yet. So that's probably where I'm at from like a handicapping point of view.
Okay. Seahawks are up on this board too. So is New England trading the 3rd pick? Like, what's going on? Like, Gerard Mayo said, we're open to trading it. Then you got Robert Kraft outspoken at the owners' meetings. Well, I would love it. Let me put my fan cap on. I'm getting sick of that with Robert Kraft. And that, like, no kidding, dude. You own the team. Like, you got to be, like, more so than ever now in major professional sports. If you own the team, you're probably rooting for the team. And I'm only bringing up 3 because if it's Drake May or Jacob, you've brought up getting a price on May to go 2. Are the Patriots open to moving back because they think they can get McCarthy, or are they not going to go quarterback?
So something I find interesting is like, if the Commanders do go with Drake May at number 2 and the JJ stuff is real, and let's say, for example, the Vikings trade up to 3 with the Patriots to take him at 3, like, where does Jayden go at that point? Like, is it 6 to the Giants? Is it lower than that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think everybody's penciling in Jayden to go top 3, but if the JJ stuff is real, like that could also be a factor. Like, if Jayden falls further than people are expecting.
It's hard to imagine. Yeah, it's hard to imagine the Patriots go into the season with Jacoby Brissett as their plan A.
Bailey Zappi's still on the roster.
Well, yeah, but
I'm just telling you what the depth chart is. You told me to keep it on the depth charts, and that's on the depth chart.
Yeah, it's not great. So
sucks.
Yeah, so maybe they do trade out and try to get one of these guys to fall. They're in a weird spot because they desperately need a QB, but it sounds like they're kind of getting the runt of the litter if they pick at 3. So they're saying, well, maybe we just punt and maybe try to get one later in the draft this year, or just wait until next year and just throw a boatload of money at Dak Prescott or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and to connect it back to the Giants. So Jacob brought up the private workout McCarthy had with the Vikings. The Patriots had a visit, and the Giants are also supposed to visit, or they have visited, Evan, with JJ McCarthy, the Giants.
I believe they have. In terms of, what was the question though? What are you trying to get to?
I'm trying to figure out if the Patriots are not drafting at 3.
Sure.
So there's no they're moving out of a position to take Daniels or take May. Then what are they trying to move back because they think McCarthy will fall to them? Like I'm trying to do the jigsaw puzzle here of what to figure out the if Travis brings up 4.5 quarterbacks in the first round, like New England, where's that 4th one coming into the picture? Giants or Patriots?
Yeah, I would probably say, I would say it's the Patriots and not the Giants. I think the Giants are probably more likely, in my opinion, to take, a wide receiver or some sort of addition to the roster versus spending the capital right now with DJ still in the mix. I was honestly, while they were, Jacob was talking about the Patriots, I was looking at Bo Nix and Penix to go to the Patriots, assuming they take the trade, they move back, and they feel comfortable enough to get one of those guys after, say, the top 3 quarterbacks go, and they get another addition to the roster. Plus they get someone to battle with Brissett. Felt like it was interesting to me. Penix is 13-1. Looked like Nix was about 12-1. So could even take both shots for small if you wanted, but that was the angle that I was looking at, assuming that they do, in my opinion, what they should do, they should get out of the slot. I think you bring a rookie quarterback into that roster, you're asking for failure versus let's build up the roster. Let's assume we're not going to do that well again this year. Let Brissett start his games and come back next year with a better pick and a better roster.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope Drake May doesn't go there. As somebody who's a big Drake May fan, like I totally agree. That roster's a mess. And I think the Bo Nix and Penix angle makes a lot of sense.
What if they sit him? What if the plan is to bring in the rookie quarterback and sit him? Now, how long does that leash really last if they get off to a bad start with Brissett, right? Like I hear the whole sit the quarterback thing, but usually the guys that are sitting, it's because there's someone respectable enough in front of them that keeps them afloat and they're not god awful.
Could work, but the fans will be clamoring. The fans will be clamoring for Drake May by week 4 when they have a 1-3 record, and Brissett's clearly not.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree.
You
I'm
trying
to paint the other side of the picture.
You even remember the Gerard Mayo comments. Like, he's telling everyone to be really patient. And I believe those were the words. It was like, he knows this is not going to be good year 1, year 2. Like, this is going to take some time. So maybe he's foreshadowing a little bit in terms of either drafting the quarterback or waiting and putting him behind him, which is kind of why I said Nix and Penix get another player on the roster or wait the year. Might be, I mean, if I was a GM of the Patriots, that's something I would be looking at doing, but he's even saying it a little bit through the tea leaves. So
again, we're recording April 1st. So we've got about 3 weeks from this Thursday when the draft takes place in Detroit. I'll go around the horn here and we'll wrap this because now I'm glad I actually liked Evan's, how he diagrammed that setup of how he relates McCarthy and Will Levis from last year, because the Levis stuff really started to pick up steam closer to draft day. Like, we're still, the timelines don't match, right? It's like the McCarthy thing has been planted so early in this process based on where we're at for our purposes with 3 weeks to go. So I'll go around the horn here. Travis, what's something you're monitoring right now, keeping in mind? And then if something breaks, if X happens, then Y and Z can occur for you to maybe play something else.
Yeah. Obviously the Minnesota trade would be the biggest one. We've mentioned that, I think, on every episode. I think these top 30 visits are going to be important to monitor. That's another thing when we talk about, position to a team. Are they bringing in 3 cornerbacks on a top 30 visit? That kind of shows their hand a little bit of position of need that they're looking at. So I'll be looking more into tracking those down. Teams only get a set amount of those, so they're going to use those wisely to get those guys on the whiteboard, drawing up plays and things like that. So I'm going to be monitoring that. And then another one is Jonathan Brooks. Going to be looking for, he's a running back out of Texas. I was looking at him as first running back to go. This is going to be on day 2. I don't think there's a running back on day 1. But he's coming off a torn ACL, so I want to kind of catch up on his medical stuff, seeing how that's doing, because I think he could be a bet there as first running back off the board.
Okay. And that's a good call out too, because I brought up the Penix visits, and 5 of those teams, I think the only one that's not there is Atlanta for a top 30 visit. But like the Steelers have a crap ton of top 30 visits, and Penix is in that mesh of dudes. Jacob Wayne, something you're keeping an eye on this week before we return next Monday?
Yeah, so we finally have markets for schools, or for conferences rather.
Okay.
So over under Big 10 players drafted in the first round, for example. On that one, I like the over and get that at -145 in one shop right now. Definitely some juice, but I'm looking at mocks right now, and we're seeing Marvin Harrison, Jayden McCarthy, Olu Fashanu, pretty much locks at this point. Cooper DeJean, pretty close to a lock to be a first round pick. And then the other 2, I think are going to be Johnny Newton. I mentioned him earlier with the Bengals. I love his profile. I think he's a first round pick. And then Chop Robinson, I think is going to sneak into the first round. Definitely much more of a traits evaluation. He only had 10 sacks in 3 years at Penn State, but his athletic numbers were off the charts. He was on my all athlete team that I published over at Action. So check that one out. But I do think he's going to be a first round pick. I think the team will bet on his traits somewhere in the back half of the first round. So over 5.5 at -145, I like a lot. And then just waiting on over under markets for player selections. So over under, whatever the market might be for Jayden McCarthy is going to be very interesting in that one as well.
Okay. And Evan Abrams, again, Travis hit it, right? Give us something here. We'll be cooking with gas with if the Vikings do move up, and whether it's McCarthy or it's Drake May, if the Vikings they're connected to both of them.
Yeah, what it means if the trade doesn't happen and keeps not happening, I think is something that I'm trying to figure out as well. What does waiting mean? So another week where we have a conversation about the Vikings, does that mean they're not doing it? Does that mean they're waiting for something? Because I think there is a linchpin there. So it's trying to figure out what that is intriguing. The over-under markets is a good call because we are waiting for those. And as you see, the McCarthy stuff is probably the most intriguing, the 3.5 minus 200 or something like that comes out. The other ones is stock ups and stock down. So like recently, Bo Nix has had a bit of a rise. I think he's up like 3 or 4 percentage points into the first round. He was at like 31. He's at like the average 27 range. So having that type of impact. And then the two teams, Colts cornerback is something that I've been kind of focusing on a little bit. I feel like whether it's Mitchell or DeJean or someone of that nature, I got it like plus 160. So I think plus money there is intriguing for Indy. And then finally, we talked about earlier, but the Chiefs wide receiver situation, just keeping an eye on that news a little bit and seeing what we can potentially do to make a little cash.
That was a good call out to start the show with Xavier Worthy, which I think you said what's it, 9-1, Travis, for the Chiefs?
Yeah,
okay.
9-1.
And just to connect that again to the position, team's first pick position, the Chiefs right now, that they're the favorite is receiver at even money. And I want to just backtrack for a second. Penix, the top 30 visits are with all those teams: the Giants, Falcons, Raiders, Broncos, Steelers. Those are all. It's not 4 of the 5. All 5 have top 30 visits. Penix has top 30 visits with those 5 teams. Okay, gents. Another one in the books. We've got at least 3 more draft episodes, and keep an eye out. We'll keep you updated on what we might be doing once we get to the week of the draft. Like last year, we did a pod episode right after day 1 to get ready for day 2 when those markets pop and become available, which those come and go. But we'll do the very best we can to deliver on that front. So find Travis Reed, Evan Abrams, Jacob Wayne just plugged an article he's got up at Action Network right now as far as a conference-related NFL betting breakdown, so be on the lookout for that. We will rejoin you again next Monday, April 8th, for another NFL Draft betting update. My name is Brendan Glasheen. Thanks for tuning into the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. We'll talk to you again next week.